Hi, I'm Jim Doddles. I will be doing a drawing demonstration for the first project in my rendering class and also in representational drawing class. The sketch part that I'm going to do today is going to apply to both classes, and then we'll veer off a little bit with materials in each class. So I'm going to talk about materials that we're going to use. This is going to be about a 4-week process, and this is week 1. So I'll have an assignment for you based on what I do in my demonstration coming up, and I will also give you a part 2 that you'll have due in the same week. Part 2 is going to be a lot less time than part 1. Part 1 should take you at least an hour, hopefully up to as long as you want to spend on it, 2 to 3 hours. So I'm going to talk about the materials that we need, the process that I'd like you to use within that drawing. There may be some things that I'm going to ask you to do that you're not aware of, you've never done them before, like measuring, using a device like a chopstick or a pencil to gauge angles and proportions, ratios, things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with materials, and let's get started. Okay, so as far as materials, I like to sketch with color erase pencil. This is indigo blue color erase. I also like to sketch with regular Prismacolor blue, indigo blue. Black is fine, dark umber is good. Anything that you can see. I like to start with the color erase because it's light in color, and so when you're drawing it you can start off fairly lightly, and then I usually shift over to the Prismacolor indigo blue because it's a little stronger and you can see it a little bit better. You could also use graphite. This is a Blackwing graphite pencil. It's probably about an HB. It doesn't really say, they don't go, they have their own number system, but if you have drawing pencils, I would recommend an H or an HB. Nothing probably darker than an HB. You don't want to smear your drawing. You don't need to get too much darker than that on a sketch. So our first layer is going to be a sketch. Okay. Other things that you could use, red pencil. I'll talk about what that's for in a minute. I've got a chopstick for measuring. You could use a separate pencil, another pencil. You could use a paintbrush if you wanted to. But if you have a chopstick laying around the house, or if you went out to eat, went to a Chinese restaurant, Japanese restaurant, use a chopstick because it's a little bit longer than a pencil. It's nice and thin. Okay, show you what we'll be doing with that in a little while. Okay, you need a ruler. 18-inch metal ruler is probably a good way to go, or a see-through ruler. 18-inch would be fine. And I'll be sketching on, it's called sketch paper. It's actually tracing paper. This is a roll of 18-inch tracing paper. If you don't want to get a roll, if you don't go to a store that has these rolls of sketch paper, then you can buy pads of tracing paper. That would be probably 14 by 17, or even better, an 18 by 24, 18-inch by 24-inch. We have a drawing board. You should have the fairly large drawing board. I believe it's 22 by 26. It's a Masonite drawing board. They have the handle. It's got some clips at the top. We're going to be working usually around 14 by 17, a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit smaller, but around 14 by 17. So you don't want a small board. We probably won't be working all the way up to 18 by 24 on too many projects or any projects. But the bigger board is what you want to use. Okay? So I've set up my drawing board to include, I told you I was going to give you a size at the beginning, and the size for this drawing is 14 by 17, roughly. We'll go with that as our base size. I put a 15 by 18, give me a little bit of wiggle room, an inch on all sides. I created a format around here, and I outlined it. I measured from the edges of the paper just to make sure that it's all right angles, level. 15 by 18. I did it on a piece of white paper. I would recommend that Hopefully you've got a large piece of white paper. If not, put a couple of pieces of tracing paper underneath with your format on it. But the reason I like the white paper is because as you put your tracing paper over it, hopefully you can see this, so you can see the format right through it. You can see the red lines where you're at. It's going to help you to stay within the range of size that I'm asking you to work with, which is 14 by 17. It's a good size. It's not too small and it's not too big. For this project, it's going to work out pretty well. So the other reason why I like the white paper underneath, besides the fact that you can see your drawing much easier, if you didn't have the white paper here, you'd be looking at the Masonite brown board, and that doesn't work out very well. You can't see it very well. So I like to draw on this paper surface. The paper surface is much better to sketch on than a Masonite board. So you've got a couple of good reasons to have a piece of white paper underneath there. So I'm going to set up for drawing. I'll have my reference here in front of me. You should use a computer screen. Hopefully you've got a computer or a laptop, or worst case scenario, maybe an iPad. But you don't want to do this off your cell phone, okay? Please. All right, so I've got my reference in front of me. This is the Belvedere torso. I'll show you some examples of the Belvedere torso drawings. It's a piece of sculpture that goes back to about the 1st century AD, I believe, Roman. It's in the Vatican Museum. It's been sketched by artists for 400 years, and you might decide that you're going to do this too. I want to get started. I want to get set up. What you want to do is you want to have your drawing board and your paper at as much of an angle up as you can. I'm fairly flat here, which is not an ideal situation, but it's going to work. It's going to have to work for this, and it can. So the reason that I want to have the drawing board up is if it's too flat on a flat table, you're going to get a lot of distortion, and it's going to be hard to draw up here. The closer this is to you, and the closer this is to actually at an angle to the screen, which we're going to call the picture plane, the better off you're going to be, because I'm going to ask you to do things like angles, and you'll see it in the demo that I do. I'm going to create angles around on the statue itself and bring those angles down to the paper. Okay, so for instance, the angle from his shoulder to his knee is this angle. Okay, so if I know that I'm going to start with the shoulder here, then I know that that angle, it's going to come out to where the knee is. Now, of course, I have to put the leg in first, and that's what a gesture drawing is going to do for me. So we don't always start off with mechanical means. I'm going to do a gesture drawing and a sketch first, and then I'm going to check it. I'm going to check my gesture drawing. But that's what I want you to use the chopstick for. So you can do proportions, ratios. So for instance, and notice that my arm is straight. Your arm always has to be straight when you're doing these ratios. From the top of his head to his leg is the same as his shoulders, the width of his shoulders across. So I can find ways to use those ratios within my drawing, and then I'll know that we're not doing the same size. This drawing is going to be much bigger than the computer image is, but at the same proportion, okay? So for instance, if I want to find the midway point, and I do, and I can do that after my thumbnail sketch, I find that if I go from the top of his head to his abdomen where it creases, and then bring that down, the abdomen to the bottom of the leg are equal, so that would mean that that's my midpoint right there, okay? So those are the things that I'm going to ask you to do within the sketch. I'll lay it out as carefully and succinctly as I can so that you can follow along with me on the demo, and then you can do that yourself. The demo that I'm going to give you is probably going to be less than 20 minutes. I might speed it up too. Just know that it's probably going to take me about an hour. You won't see me do the sketch for an hour, but I'd like you to spend at least an hour, and as much as 2 or 3 hours if you want to, but a minimum, let's say, of an hour. And the tools that I'm going to show you how to use within your drawing will give you that opportunity to spend the kind of quality time on a drawing that you should. Okay, let's draw. So I'm starting here with an overall sketch. I've just finished a thumbnail sketch at the top right. You'll see that later. Blocking in just areas from top to bottom, side to side. I've established that the length of the statue is about 1/3 longer than the width, so I take that into consideration. And I start blocking in the form. Very loose, very lightly. I know it's going to take a while before you can see it, but I'm also now working with angles. I'm creating an envelope around the form, as you can see in the left-hand side picture. You can keep this fairly light, it shouldn't be too dark. I'm also working on the inside for angles, using my chopstick, the way I showed you. Also notice the way that I'm holding my pencil, holding it very loosely in an underhand manner. That way I can move it around the drawing much easier. I'm also looking for anything that lines up and measures the same. So I line some things up vertically, horizontally. Now I'm breaking up measurements using my chopstick, finding out where the midpoint is. It's right at that little bend of the abdomen, the little crease right there. It's the same above that and below that size. Equal measurements. Now the idea of finding those equal measurements and finding any measurements and proportions that are the same is that if they're not on your drawing, then you should change those. You should refine your drawing. You're using the tool to find the accurate angles on the screen, but then you're applying that information to your drawing. I'm looking for any areas at all that I can find on the statue that are the same, and I'm applying that to my drawing wherever I can. And at this stage, I've moved ahead about maybe 10 minutes, and I'm now refining the contour line. Everything has been blocked in. I'm fairly sure about where everything should be, exterior and a lot of interior structure. So now I can spend the time on developing it a little bit more and not worry so much about erasing it, changing it, because I spent that time at the beginning figuring out what needed to be changed, what needed to be the same size, what needs to line up with what. So at this point I've changed pencils. I put down the Color Erase Indigo Blue, and I picked up the Prismacolor Indigo Blue, which is a little bit darker and a little bit richer. I feel pretty confident in my drawing now that I can strengthen it, darken it, make it a little easier to see. So the things that I'd like you to remember are try to hold your pencil like this, underhand. You won't get the real sharp point. It'll be a softer edge to work with, a little bit more forgiving. Easier to move it around the page, which is really important. Using these techniques and tools that I've been talking about is a really great way to take your drawings to the next level. It's not a question just of, okay, I drew it, it's good enough, I'll leave it the way it is. This is a rendering class, even in representational drawing, where we're looking for that refined contour, that refined form. So remember that, bring those elements into your drawing. It'll be much stronger for it. You use a pencil or a chopstick for angles, block in an envelope, use it for lining up, measuring, proportions. And remember, we're working bigger, we're working larger here than it is on the screen, your references. So we're not actually taking exact same sizes from the screen to your drawing, but we're extrapolating that information, we're taking those proportions, and we're bringing it to your drawing.